Hi, I'm Jamie.
Hey, I'm Terry.
And this is the BodySmartPodcast.
And today we're talking all things motivation, habit building, and your inner bitch.
Hello, Mr. Anderson.
Jamie.
Every time Mr. Anderson, it's just Matrix kicks in. Today, we've got something that a lot of our clients struggle with, which is motivation. Do you struggle with motivation at all?
Yeah, motivation goes peaks and troughs for me. Like I know, for me personally, with like whether it's work motivation, whether it's like my own training, I know what I need to do to be motivated, and so I think it's probably a combination of like over the years, like knowing what works for me, how and when I felt most motivated, but also understanding that motivation is a bit of a farce.
Yeah, it comes and goes.
That, when you know that and you have that knowledge and you can implement it right, then you can create your own motivation through, what we know about it. And I think that's probably the combination of where I'm at. Although every single person is going to dip in motivation for whatever reason at different times, as long as you know how to get it back and you're aware of it, you can do, what's needed to kind of spark some motivation. So I feel like I'm pretty good at that myself. You
mentioned then, like, you know how to almost get motivated. Like, do you have like a formula that you try to roll out, or like a certain habits that you have, or an environment? Like, what is it that you do personally to help curate more motivation?
A big one for me is goal setting. Usually I'll at different times in the year, like I tend to go through like things like everyone has that like high spell in January. It's nice to set new goals for the year, like and aspire towards, what you want to do. I think for me, like setting clear goals of like work and my health and fitness at the beginning of a year is always a big one. Mm-hmm. But then when you do dip down like for a year, or maybe your goals aren't being hit so much, like things that I'll do is I'll sign up to it. Like for example, in like CrossFit, like I know that in February there's going to be like the CrossFit Opens. Then I'll make sure I'll sign up to an event like later down the year, or previously it'll be like, right, I'll sign up for a marathon. And I always make sure I sign up for the event or the challenge or whatever it might be before I'm ready for it, because that's what like gets me going.
Yeah.
And that seems to be a big thing for me, is set a target. In the past it might have even been like a photo shoot for work pictures or whatever it might have been. Like I sign up before I'm anywhere near ready, and then that's what then puts a plan in place for me.
Yeah. No, that's good. I mean, I think goal setting always gives you that driver to keep those actions going and to really get into everything. For me, I always find like motivation comes at a peak when I'm just kind of in motion. Normally when I'm in like a really good routine and I'm being consistent. It's not like at the beginning of doing that. It's actually when I'm like a couple of weeks into being consistent and really being in motion, I've started to feel more motivated to keep doing the things that whether it's exercise or eating well or whatever else it might be. A lot of our clients, you see this all the time. It's a big issue they have is that they say, I'm not motivated, or I'm just not a person that's motivated. And this is obviously just a belief that they have and they carry about themselves. What do you say to some of the women or the ladies that we coach when stuff like that's happening?
I think first of all, like helping them realize that a lot of the time it is a limiting belief, and just simply being aware of that helps in the first place. As in, it's, as a coach, you can say to someone, not everyone's motivated, but they're still not going to see that unless they actually see the results themselves. So like you can tell someone, oh, that person's not motivated either, but deep down that client might be thinking, well, yeah, they're definitely more motivated than I am.
Yeah, I would say that's the perception around myself and you, is people will look at us and be like, well, you're just motivated all the time, or like it's just different for me. You don't get it, like in that sort of sense.
Yeah, exactly. And I always say I wish I could like screenshot every, in inverted commas, like motivated client and show their results to every unmotivated client, because the differences are the actions that the person's taking. It's not that suddenly that motivation has been curated and then that's why they take the actions. What we see repeatedly with clients is that it is literally the ones that are showing up, ticking the boxes. They then build that momentum that looks like motivation, but they had to start in the same place as the unmotivated client. But you can only show that through data or through action or through the client themselves actually just trusting you, trusting BodySmart, trusting the process of coaching, and then just regardless of whether they're motivated or not, just show up and start doing those things, and then they'll see those results themselves. But it's not always the easiest thing. I think it's probably one of the harder things to put across to a client is showing the difference between someone who's like motivated or not. It's difficult to show someone until they're actually just doing it.
Yeah. And I think it's difficult. Like I am not motivated to do half the things I do. And if I let my feelings dictate my actions, like I just wouldn't get a lot done. I think most people wouldn't. You have to almost like become disciplined in those areas and just push through and keep showing up on those days where you don't want to do it. And then some days you accept, you feel motivated, and that's great. And those days feel better. But then on the other days, it's I think that's really what builds that like self-trust and that discipline is like showing up and doing the thing that you said you would do, regardless of how you feel. Like it's the workouts when you feel motivated and you've got high energy are great and things go to plan. It's the workouts where, and I'm using workouts because that is a big thing that people say about motivation, but it's obviously with everything when it comes to your health and wellness. But it's those workouts then when you actually go, when you don't want to go, when you don't feel like going, when you don't feel like getting up, they're the ones that count the most because they build your character to allow you to go the distance. And I think a lot of people forget like the distance is life. You know what I mean? Like your health and wellness is something that if you don't use it, you lose it. And you really want to be continually acting on that and understand that you will have peaks and troughs of motivation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like the thing that's, you know, what we all do with our clients at BodySmart, like, you know, we are science backed. We base everything around science. And so when we look at, you know, whether it's like a workout or whether it's doing a cold shower, like we know the physiology. Like you can't beat the physiology of what it does for you. You can't like skip it or anything like that. And when you understand that, like, regardless of how you're feeling at the time, if you go and have a workout, you're going to feel better. And actually, if you don't feel so good to start with, you're probably going to see an even bigger impact of what that workout will do for you at the back end because of that endorphin release and how good it's made you feel. You're going to see more of a difference than someone who was already feeling good at the time when they took the workout in the first place. Or similarly with the cold shower, like the more you don't want to do it, the more like you'll seemingly just get that like good feeling afterwards. Yeah. And I mean, that's the short-term effects. Obviously with exercise or with cold therapy, there's lots of long-term benefits, but it's doing those things at the times when you don't want to do them that builds those long-term effects. And I think it's that knowledge underpinning that when you know what you're doing is going to be good for you, it helps you do it. It doesn't always make, you know, it doesn't always make people do it. We know that. You can put, you know, you see this on advertising for like cigarette campaigns. Like
of course.
They can plaster anything over the front and it still doesn't mean that they're not going to have a cigarette. But, you know, the more knowledge you have, like knowledge helps you understand why you're doing something. And if you understand why, it makes you more likely to do it repeatedly than if you don't understand why you're doing something.
Yeah. Like I think a lot of people think, especially like myself and you, like I have that mental chatter all the time of like trying to tell me like, just stay in bed a little bit longer. Don't do the workout today. Like I call it my inner bitch. And it shows up a lot, and especially shows up a lot if I'm like really stressed or I'm like burning the candle at both ends, or if I'm just been pushing training too hard. The worst one I actually had was like, it was actually this week, and I wanted to get a cold shower, or said I would get a cold shower, but then I was just like, oh, maybe I won't, because it's just, no one ever enjoys a cold shower. It's always just a horrible shock to put your body on. And then I forgot to take my watch into the shower, and I was like, oh, the shower's on, it's warm, I just won't do it this time. And I instantly like had to stop myself, because I was like, this is just like I knew I'd beat myself up all day for not going and doing it. So like huffing and puffing when I got my watch, got in the cold shower, done like 2 minutes. I was just like effing and bliming the whole time at myself. But like, obviously you feel great afterwards. And it was more just the fact of like my body, my brain, everything was telling me like not to do the thing that I kind of knew I should do. And even if it didn't even give me any like physiological benefits, which it does, and same with exercise, it's more the fact of just like doing something even though I don't want to do it, even though my feelings and my body's telling me not to do it. I think it's very character building and allows you to go the distance. And
yeah, especially with those difficult things like that, like you literally just need to get it to that point where it is a habit and you're not even questioning it anymore. Like recently where I've been sick and I had a few days where I didn't have the cold shower. Like I was telling myself, you know, it's going to make me feel better. But
we're really promoting the cold showers here, aren't we?
I was physically feeling feeling like rubbish, and I ended up having warm showers just because, so I wasn't shivering afterwards.
Yeah.
But then I got to a point where I was actually I was better, and I should have started just doing them again, and I didn't, because I was like out of that habit, because I haven't built it as like just a black and white. There's no even question yet. Like I still question it every time I get it. But then my girlfriend was like, "Have you started doing your cold showers again yet?" Like I just had one, and as soon as she said that, I was like, I haven't done it. I should. And then immediately I was like, the next one I have to do, because I was feeling better. There was no reason why I shouldn't be doing it. I just got comfortable again of like taking hot showers.
Yeah.
And but then knowing that, one, she was doing it because I'm a bit competitive. Two, that I was like, there's no reason not to be doing this now. Like I took a cold shower again straight away, because I know I need to get to that place where I don't even question it anymore.
Yeah. And it's weird. I think a lot of people will look at like workouts and like, why would you want to put yourself through a hard grueling workout, or why would you want to get a cold shower? And I think like the irony of doing something that's like quote unquote hard is it actually makes like the rest of your day, and sometimes I would even go as far as like your life, easier. Like when you can actually consistently show up and force yourself to do very hard things, it actually gives you an easier life. And a lot of people that I speak to, and even some friends, like they're always just like, oh, I just want an easy life. I just want an easy life. And they kind of see that as like a leisure and comfort, versus for me, I'm like, by consistently forcing yourself to do hard things, you'll enjoy your leisure and your comfort more than just doing comfort things all the time.
Yeah, for sure. Like I love the saying, it's like choose your hard. Like life is hard. You know, it's either going to be hard because you're working hard in the gym, you're doing a cold shower, or you're eating healthy and planning your food, or it's hard because you're overweight and walking up and down the stairs is hard, or you're in and out of hospital because you're getting sick. Like there's, you know, and you could say it about literally everything, you know, like learning to drive a car is hard, but so is walking everywhere. You know, like there's an answer for everything, and like life is just hard. There's no getting away from that. It's just which ones are the better hards. You know, you choose your hard, you choose what you want to do, and I think that like keeping that in the forefront of your mind is what there's always a choice with these types of things, or most of the time anyway. And it's just a case of like understanding that probably the repercussions of not choosing the healthy hards leads to some unhealthy hards, and they usually have, you know, a lot bigger problems associated with them.
100%. And a big thing we've brought up a couple of times here is habit, you know, and just like building habits, whether it's with your exercise, your nutrition. And we got this quote here by Aristotle saying, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit." And I think that's is you know, having excellence in your life is obviously something that a lot of people would strive for and want. But habits, like how do we even start to build them, or how do you start to build them with clients?
Yeah, so habits, the important thing is start small and build. And if you're not being successful with that habit, we need to shrink the change, essentially. We call it like shrinking the change. So if it's too big that you're not doing it consistently enough, we need to make it smaller, easier, more attractive to do. You know, a lot of the work that we do with our habits, and you know, even at BodySmart, we actually win awards for what we do with our habits.
Yes, we did.
To throw that in there. But with regards to what we do, it's because habits work, like, and it's seen time and again. Research says it all the time, and you'll see it in countless points in your life, your daily life, where a habit has been implemented and works for you. But it's important when you're first learning a new a habit, you need to make it easy to do. You need to make it obvious. You need to make it attractive to do. Oftentimes pairing it with, or habit stacking it with something else. So, you know, for example, if you're trying to learn how to, I don't know, like let's just say you were learning a script, you're an actor, and you were trying to learn something. If you had to pair that with brushing your teeth, and you kept repeating the lines you needed to say whilst brushing your teeth, in your mind, like you start to, twice a day, every single day, you're going to say those lines, and you're going to do that because you're not going to not brush your teeth. And when you start to do things like that, you'll pair that secondary habit will become easier. It'll become something that ingrains in itself as well. So that's the sort of thing that we'll do within coaching. You know, it's starting small. If it's trying to get workouts into your life, do we start with simply putting your workout clothes out the night before. Or
I've literally done that for like the last 15 years. Like anytime I'm working out the night before, like the next day or the next morning, like I pack my bag and I lay all my gym clothes out. And it's like I'm setting the intention the night before. And it's like I still do that to this day. So I could get up and get a shower. My clothes are already set out, put my gym clothes on, bags packed, straight off to the gym. And that's one that's worked for me for a long time.
Yeah, it literally is just usually the thing before the thing. It's not like the actually going and doing the workout is always the issue. It's like, did you plan that into your day, or did you set your kit out? Did you do the thing before the thing that allowed you to then go and do that thing? And that's where we have to unpick it sometimes as coaches. We have to understand, like, where in that client's day is it that the problem here? Is it actually the night before? They're just not setting themselves up right. Is it that their phone is close enough to the bed that they put it on pause or snooze or whatever, and actually they need to put that phone further away, so they actually have to get out of bed. And then by the time they get out of bed, if their clothes are there, it's easier to then put those workout clothes on. And then all of a sudden you're just, well, I'm up now, my clothes are on, I may as well go to the gym. And then it goes from there. So we'll unpick it and start it at the point which it needs to start at. And if that is very, very small, if that is very basic, then that's where it needs to start, because it's from there. It's the consistency of doing that thing that leads to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Yeah.
And that's how you start to make big change, versus like what you've just said there is, make a small change, stay consistent with it, and then build upon that, versus I would say what most people do when they start a health and fitness kick is they actually do the complete opposite of that. They try and change so much. I mean, we're going into January soon, and we're going to see that, like, most people are going to go, I'm going to only eat vegetables, and I'm going to eat quote unquote really clean. I'm going to go to the gym 5 times. And it's such a huge shift to their behaviors and their environment that, you see it, they have that initial motivation for and it peaks for like a week or two, but then it's just such a change to what they do. Like most people, I would say, just like drop off and can't stay consistent with it because it's just too much of a change for them.
Yeah, exactly. This is exactly the same. You do see it like in January, like massively, but any fad diet that someone's done, or yo-yo diet in the past, it's a similar thing. It's like that change, albeit some of the ways that people will diet is notoriously just unhealthy doing it anyway, but oftentimes it's just that they're too unsustainable. It is a way, like a lot of these fad diets are a way to get some body fat off, but they're just too big, it's too unsustainable, it's too far away from real life that change is never ever going to stick. And unless it's a way of eating that you can manage for the rest of your life to some degree, then it's probably been too big of a change to ever be, ever keep the results you got from it in the first place, which is exactly what we see. It's what this science, repeatedly shows with these fad diets is it's just too big of a change. It's too unsustainable, oftentimes unhealthy as well. But
I think a lot of the time,
yeah,
unhealthy.
A lot of the time, yeah. That's why it's you don't see these changes stick at all. And it's the same with exercise in January when everyone just tries to change everything. It just doesn't work.
Yeah. I think like perception and expectations that people have as well is because you've maybe done these quote unquote fad diets or really restrictive diets, you see like massive scale losses, or you might see results in the first 1 to 2 weeks. And then your expectation comes after that is like, oh, I should always see quote unquote results this fast. And I say quote unquote with results because and even like speed and fast, I'm always like, well, fast is relative. Like a lot of people think, oh, well, I should lose 4 pounds a week or 5 pounds a week. That's fast fat loss or weight loss, because I done that when I done this for 2 or 3 weeks, and that's what I saw. And it's like, well, if that was so successful, then why were we not able to lose that weight and keep it off? And people then have that expectation of and this can be a set, like, because what we have to do as coaches, we have to sell our clients on the ideas that we're presenting to them around habits. And those small changes, sometimes what you just said, do not seem that appealing to clients. They want the right here, the right now. I want to see results fast. And it can be difficult. Like, what do you normally say to the clients who are just like, no, Terry, I can do more than that. Like, I want to do more than that. I want to do more workouts. I can push harder. I can push faster.
Yeah. I mean, with that, like, I tend to always say to a client, and if you lost 52 pounds this year, like if I said to you at the start of January, right, you are going to lose 52 pounds this year, would you snap my hand off? Like if that was the case? And they'd be like, yeah. Most people probably don't need to lose 52 pounds, like, or, you know, and those that do, you know, to do that in a year is, they would probably be like, wow, yeah, I've been literally trying to do this for 30 years and it's not worked. That's £1 a week.
Yeah.
That's not groundbreaking. If you said to then someone, okay, £4 in a month, most people again would be like, that's really slow. But as soon as you look at the bigger picture of when was the last time you lost £52 in a year and kept it off, most people would say never.
Yeah.
You know, or once or twice in their life, maybe. But even then, like if they've had to do it multiple times, they've not obviously kept it off. But that's the difference, is when you look at that small change over a bigger period of time, it is a big change. And especially if you've done it in the way that you can keep it off and you have learned how to sustain that, it's great losing, you know, £14 in a month. But if you put that 8 back on the next week and you do that, like, you know, it's going to take you forever to get to where you want to be. And, you know, and it's
or you never get there.
Yeah,
you know, for a lot of ladies, they do that and they spike down, spike up, spike down, spike up. And that's a repeated cycle they do for a really long period of time. I think the irony of all of that is that word fast gets used a lot. Like, oh, I just want to see faster results, so I want to lose weight faster. When the irony of it all is like what you've just said, like losing £1 a week. If you can lose £1 a week and then get to your goal and sustain it, and that's actually the fastest way for you to go. Like if I think fast is always relative. Like we've got some clients, and you know, that might lose £1/4 pound or £half a week. We've got some clients that are losing £2 or £3 a week. Like not one's going faster than the other. They're all, it's relative to how fast they can go with maybe the other commitments they've got outside of their health and fitness at that moment in time and everything else that goes into it. But yeah, it's definitely, it plays a big part in that like expectation of how quick we should see results.
Yeah, exactly. And I use my coach at CrossFit actually uses this analogy for the barbell when you're trying to learn a barbell technique, and it's slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And you know, you can literally use that for weight loss as well, in that if you slow down and you make it sustainable and you apply it into your life in the right way, you're gonna have a much smoother journey with your weight loss than this up and down all over the place, spiking everywhere because you're trying to do unsustainable things. And if you're doing it smooth, then smooth leads to being fast. And that is, you know, what you're talking about there is losing 30, 40, 50 plus pounds in a year because you went slow, or, you know, in inverted commas, slow.
No, 100%. And I think, yeah, it's a perception and expectation that a lot of people have. We've got back to our quote there from Aristotle. One of the things that we have got here is there's a study that shows that over 50% of what we do each day are habits. So, I mean, that's a high percentage, you know, and I think where we have got a habit, it almost does become like an unconscious behavior, something that we almost do on autopilot. I think there's sometimes like when I'm driving home, you know, and if I'm just like away with the fairies or I'm listening to something, sometimes I'll just autopilot drive home when I was meant to go somewhere else, you know, and it's just like that habitual route is kicked in, and I've started driving and I'm like, sometimes I'm like, oh shit, like I'm going the wrong way. But you know, again, like that's just, I think becomes like the importance of like, if we do create those healthy habits and create that healthy environment, all of a sudden, you know, I think a lot of people think like, oh, it's so hard to eat healthy, or it's so hard to exercise or be consistent. But then if you start to create these healthy habits and they become a part of who you are and your environment, then it actually becomes almost just like your default to stay on top of it. I think the issue is, so people feel like they're so far over here that to get to that place where it feels easier and like default, they just don't believe it's a reality or a possibility.
Yeah, and that's where those limiting beliefs like come in. It's hard as a coach to show someone it without them actually just doing it. I wish we could snapshot them to that life where they feel better, because it would provide all that motivation that they need to get there. But
it's huge, isn't it, as well? Like that, it literally does come down to a limiting belief, and we can say it as words, but it is often until the client has actually taken the actions themselves, and then you start to just see their beliefs change. And like you get like that penny drop moment like a couple of times, like, oh my God, like this is so much easier now that's happening, or this is so much easier now that's happening. And then it's like a super rewarding moment as a coach, because you can start to see the beliefs change as a byproduct of the environment and action changing, and it's just starting to sink in. But yeah, like you said at the beginning, it's just words for us. It's not, a lot of people don't believe it.
Yeah, exactly. It's tough to see. I think I was talking on another podcast that we did about necessity, and I think sometimes when you've got that the clarity and the necessity there of what you're going to achieve, like you have to believe it because there's no other way of not doing it. And I think I always use like with clients to try and help them understand what where they need to get to is like driving a car. After you saying that analogy before, is people need to drive cars. Like they, for them, it's not a question of like, I'm going to walk forever or I'll get public transport. Like their want, their necessity, their need to have a car in their life to make it easier or whatever it might be is so much so that whether or not they believe they can drive or not, they go and show up to those lessons and they essentially fail every single time they get in that car until they've done it enough times that they don't fail anymore. And then they do it so much that they pass their test, they can drive the car themselves, and then it becomes so much of a habit which it actually becomes almost impossible to forget.
Yeah.
Like you if you know how to drive a car, you couldn't just say to someone, forget how to drive. Like it's impossible to just get in and not know how to do it.
Yeah.
Because you've done it so many times. And that's exactly the same with any habit-based thing that we try and teach you, whether it's your fitness, whether it's to do with how you shop, you eat, you prep your food or whatever it might be. As long as you believe that you can do it and you have that like clear defining why you're doing this, you just keep showing up, you keep doing it, even if it feels like you're failing. Eventually you won't. And then once you're not failing anymore, or it's not failing, we call it failing forward, because essentially it's just not doing that thing until you are doing it. And once you're doing it and you do it enough times, it'll be pretty hard not to do it.
Yeah.
And that's the game-changing moment. That's when this is part of your life and it's not going anywhere.
Yeah. I think so many people have such a negative relationship with failure. Like if I failed or if this hasn't worked out, it's almost as if like, well, I'm not good enough and this isn't for me. I don't deserve to live a fit and healthy lifestyle. If we really like apply a growth mindset to that situation, like every failure is a lesson. And we just say to clients, they're micro failures. They teach us like what not to do and how we can move and grow and keep pushing forward, which is really important, because that is ultimately how we will get to the place that we need to be, whether it's like developing those habits, developing those skills, and really pushing forward to become basically the person that you need to become in order to keep the results that you've got.
Yeah, absolutely. Like there's literally nothing that you will have done that you wouldn't have had to employ habit building as part of it, whether it is brushing your teeth, learning a new skill, learning how to cook, teaching your children how to do X, Y, or Z. I mean, when you're trying to teach a baby how to walk, it's like you'll just keep picking them up when they fall over and they'll go again, and you'll keep picking them up. And there's loads of things that you'll do to teach children how to live and, how to become a human like you. And it just means doing the things over and over and over again until they know how to do it. But we often forget stuff like that. Like we forget that we taught our children how to do that, or we forget that we had to go and brush our teeth a million times for it to just be something you do every day. But when it's applied and you think about it in your health and fitness, people often forget and they just think it's some completely different process that's never going to be right for them, when actually it literally is the same. You just have to apply the same set of rules, show up, put the reps in, and you'll develop the habit as well. Yeah.
I think the baby analogy is really good, because I think actually a lot of adults forget how to fail, or they get such, like we said, like such a negative relationship with failure. Like a lot of people will go to the gym or will start a new sport or will do anything, and they'll go like 5 or 10 times and they'll go in with the mindset of like, I don't like this, I hate this. And they're not very good at it as well, because you're new to it. And so, we have that with clients where they don't really like it, but then 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line, they've got like proficient at moving the bodies and squatting and hinging and pushing and pressing and pulling. And then they start to enjoy it more because they know what they're doing. They feel good doing it. They feel confident doing it, but it took time. It took repeated failure for them to get there. And I think something that you hear like a lot of fitness coaches say is that like, oh, you've got to find exercise that you enjoy. And I think a lot of people always struggle with that. Like, how do I go and find something that I enjoy? And I think a big part of that is you have to go and try new things, and you have to accept that you're gonna suck at them. Like, you're really gonna suck at them to begin with, and you're not gonna be very good. But persevering through, I actually think and if you can flip and change your mindset around this, anytime you start something new, if you're really, really bad at it, like in the beginning, you actually make the most gains. Like, you learn so much every time you go to, like, let's say you've done a martial art or you played tennis. Like, every time you go, you might feel really bad, but you're actually making way more progress than you do when you're advanced. Like, when you're advanced, you just make like the smallest incremental gains of consistently showing up, versus like in the beginning, like in a couple of months, you can like completely change how good you are. And that is actually more motivating in itself, but you've just actually got to persevere and push through that first like 10 or 20 sessions of feeling comfortable, or feeling uncomfortable, should I say, and then that's where that motivation in my eyes starts to build, because you start to enjoy it, because it starts to click a little bit more.
For sure. You're never ever gonna, I mean, you know, it's pretty rare that you'll ever just pick something up perfectly in the first instance you do it. Like I remember when I first started playing the drums, I do not come from a musical family. I didn't pick up an instrument until I was 27, and I am definitely not a pro at it now. But what I have done is had a lesson for 7 years, and like pretty much most weeks I'll have a lesson, and that even that 1 hour a week has enabled me to be consistent enough that I can play along to songs now. I can play the drums a bit, and to me that's a prime example of, you just apply that same thing there. Like, you don't have to be, you know, like people say they're in tone deaf, or like, I'm not a musical person. But I wasn't a musical person. I literally just got lessons, started out with just 1, 2, 3, 4. And then eventually now you can play songs, and you can sit there and jam along to songs that just without even thinking about it. And it's just exactly the same thing again. But to start with, it felt like I was like, how the hell am I going to go from not being able to communicate my arms and my feet together and like sounding awful on the drums to actually being able to play a song?
Yeah.
It's just time, it's reps, and then every single time you get a little bit better, you fail a little less, and then eventually you can do it. And it might take you a few years in some cases, depending on what it is you're doing. And other times you'll make those rapid gains.
Yeah.
And you'll see that, like, you know, you'll change dramatically, particularly with health and fitness. I think it's probably one of the faster things you see. And I almost get jealous of like new clients, because you think, actually, if I knew what I knew now, when I was first starting my health and fitness, I would have utilized that window where you change dramatically to my advantage a lot more than what I probably did.
100%. I think a lot of people, and again, I think this comes down to beliefs, or say like, oh, it's so much easier for Sandra or so much easier for Julie or whatever else when it comes to their health and fitness, maybe because they picked it up a little bit faster. I just look at it all, like you said, with the drums, it's all just skills, like learning to move your body effectively in the gym or exercise, and, you know, your nutrition, your self-awareness, it's all just a skill. And some people, you know, are higher up that skill bar, maybe because of how they were brought up, maybe because of some of the good habits they've got, maybe some of the bad habits they've got. And it's all just a skill. And with anything, through enough like education, sets, reps, and perseverance, you can get to a place where you become very proficient at it. Like the way you said, now you can proficiently play along to the drums, but that took 7 years. Hopefully it didn't take 7 years to get to play a good song. Yeah, but you know, it took a long time of consistently showing up. And I think that's the exact same with with your nutrition. A lot of the ladies that I know that we coach, there is that self-limiting belief of like, I'll just never get it. But that's not the case. With the right education, the right sets and reps, and persevering through, you can get to a place where you can actually be really proficient with your nutrition and actually do it quite mindlessly and easy. And I feel like a lot of people have a disconnect and believe like that's not a reality, but it 100% is. And it's the same with your training. It's the same with your nutrition. Like I said, and a big one is like same with your self-awareness. Like, you have to know why you do what you do, and why sometimes maybe you sabotage yourself, and why sometimes you don't, and, you know, understanding those triggers and how to put yourself in a position to succeed. Again, just all a skill. Like, how come every Friday I end up overeating on X? Oh, you know, is it because of, you know, we have blasted, don't we, as one of our acronyms of figuring out more around physiological and psychological hungers. But just again, asking those questions, moving yourself forward, like that's a skill that you're flexing and putting reps in to become more aware, to keep moving yourself forward.
Yeah, it's impossible not to see the results if you just are doing the things. sometimes you will find it difficult, and that's what the coaches are there for, to be able to work through that, because we understand, different ways around the same, problem or struggle, and it's just a case of understanding that for you. We only ever ask the client to do one thing, and that's just show up with a growth mindset, because if you're
could you explain that a little bit more, like what you see a growth mindset as?
Yeah, so it's that ability to like fail forward, like when something doesn't go right at the weekend, rather than just having that self-sabotage and going, well, there's just no point, this isn't for me, I'm not that type of person, this isn't it, I'm never going to be able to lose weight. It's being able to go, okay, that didn't work, but why didn't it work? And then talk that through with your coach, and the coach will be able to help you understand that. And it's that growth mindset of going, I can do that behavior and I can get it wrong, but I want to learn from it, because I don't want to keep doing that behavior, because it's that behavior that's keeping me where I am, and is why I signed up in the first place. So if I keep doing this, I'm not going to get anywhere. And it's being that aware to be able to go, okay, maybe I did mess up this weekend and it didn't help my goals, but let's see if there's a better way of doing that next time that happens. And that's what that growth mindset is being able to show up and learn from mistakes, learn from, trialing something that didn't quite work. Okay, I did put my clothes out in the morning and it did nothing for me. Okay, so what do we need to do? Do we need to literally put them closer to your bed? Like what's the next thing that we need to try to make that viable for you in your life? And as long as you're willing to just try, see if it worked, and then try again and again and again, like you will always find a solution, especially with a coach there to help guide you. And you will always eventually, if you do it enough times, see the result. And it will happen. There's no question about it.
100%. And the opposite of a growth mindset is a fixed mindset, and that is where people are like fixed with their approach. Oh no, I have to do a meal plan, or oh no, I have to, or they have fixed beliefs, or like, oh no, I have a certain gene, or I have X, and it's, it puts you in a box. It doesn't allow you to think creatively, or to think forward, or to fail forward and continue to learn and grow because you're not thinking like that. Something we've mentioned on a couple of times here, which is that, for some people it is easier to achieve their health and fitness success than others. And also that, a big part of this can be just different backgrounds, different privileges. I think that's a word that gets thrown up a lot. And privilege comes in obviously lots of different ways, but plays a huge part in, obesity and, people's mindset. You've got trauma, you've got whether you were obese as a child, financial, like how much money you make, how much money your family's made. There's just so many, it's so multifaceted and complex. Yeah. And I think that's why obesity is such a complex issue within itself. How do you feel about all of this when, some people are like, well, it's so much easier for Karen to get results than it is for me. She's had this, she's had that, she doesn't struggle with food the way I do, or she's never been like, she's 20 pounds overweight, but I'm 100 pounds overweight. There's a lot of that like victim culture or blame culture that goes around. And as much as I feel like you can't not ignore all of those issues that people have gone through, I definitely feel like pointing the finger instead of pointing the thumb doesn't ever serve people. It never allows them to move forward, even though those are very real issues that should be addressed. Again, it's a touchy subject, but I think it's like an important one to cover.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's difficult because, again, if you've got a client or someone who's got a mindset that's like that, it does make it difficult for you to show them that that's just not the case. And even if you've got two people who are seemingly very different backgrounds, different upbringings, one's seemingly in a much better place than the other, often even if the person B tried to copy what person A was doing, it wouldn't work for them, because maybe they have got a completely different job. Maybe they are a CEO of a company that was passed down to them through their family. They don't have any kids. And this person is a stay-at-home mum with 4 children. Mm-hmm. If she tried to copy what the CEO does, oftentimes that's not going to work for her. Yep. And so even comparing, just that comparison itself is a pointless exercise. And what every single person needs to know is that when you look at yourself and you apply the same set of rules that gets people fat loss, whether it's the 20 pounds that person A needs or the 100 pounds that person B needs, in their lives, you'll still get the same results, whether that is on high-end food or not so high-end food, whether that is, you know, whilst walking every day instead of working out in your like plush home gym that you've got. You know, the same set of rules still apply. We just have to apply it to each other's lives, and it's stopping that comparison and actually just taking a look at what do I need to do is when someone starts to get results.
I've said this on many podcasts, but like one of my favorite quotes is, you know, not necessarily your fault, but always your responsibility. And I think it's easier to blame your parents, blame the way you were raised, blame your job, blame how much money you've got, blame all of these different situations. It's much, much harder to sit there and take responsibility for it. And yet, like, some other people may have it easier than you and probably do and are more privileged than you. But like, just pointing that out and stating that, like, that's fair, especially if they're being a dick. You know, they definitely deserve to be pointed out. But, you know, I just, the whole idea of just like, you know, pointing the finger is it just doesn't allow you to move forward. It keeps you actually stuck. It keeps you in that fixed mindset of like, well, I can't achieve X because that person has it so much easier than me. And I think just coming back and taking personal responsibility again, it's like not necessarily your fault. Like if you were brought up and you were obese as a child, or you were brought up and you've got a shitload of bad habits to overcome, like that is going to be statistically a lot harder for you than someone who's not had that. But like, again, saying that and pointing that out and making that an issue of why you can't get results does not serve you. It just almost like passes over the blame and the responsibility. And yeah, I think that's just always like, I don't have all the answers to the obesity epidemic and the crisis that's going on. I don't think anyone does, because it's so multifaceted. However, I do know that people taking more responsibility for where they are, you know, if you're an adult, you know what I mean? Like you can think freely for yourself. Like you do have to take that ownership to put things on you and be like, and I think just a huge part of that is you could be in a really shitty situation and feel like I've got like, it feels like just a complete another world away to get to where I need to be. And that can just be so overwhelming in itself. But if you just do what you said before, just was like start small, you know, start simple, make it easy. Like just over time, those small changes really do compound and make a massive difference.
Yeah, I think it's in the subtle art of not giving a fuck, where he says, I think Mark Manson says there was a year where he just decided to take responsibility for everything, like take ownership for everything, regardless of whether he thought it was his fault, whether it was he woke up and the day seemed like it was just going against him. He just took responsibility for everything, to a point where he was, you know, you would take responsibility for things that definitely weren't your fault or whatever. Yeah. But what that does is it led to action of like, okay, this has happened. I'm going to take ownership for it. So it's my job to now find a solution to this. And then when you do that, you're just constantly taking action. And it's not to say
it's like a growth mindset on steroids.
Yeah, exactly. and you know, like it's probably, you don't need to go to that extreme level, but if you take ownership for more things in life, you will start taking action more often and you'll get the results off the back of that.
I think it is. It's that mindset of when you do that, like when you burn the bridges and say, like, I'm going to burn the bridges, I'm going to take responsibility for everything that happens to me moving forward, and I'm going to reflect on it, I'm going to learn from it, I'm going to grow from it. You just keep doing that, like for 3-6 months, a year, like you will just be a completely different person. Like you will be unrecognizable from the person you were 12 months ago. And I think that's something to really keep in mind, that like if you are in that place where you have been stuck for a long time, years or decades sometimes in our clients' lives, like just understanding that like you can get to that point in like 6 months to a year if you just get out your own way, if you are really willing to just burn the bridges and take ownership of things moving forward. Yeah. So I know we've been on motivation today. We've got into personal responsibility and accountability. Habits is obviously a huge one on behavior change. I mean, have you got any, like, if we were to give everyone listening the top 3 tips of like what they can do around motivation and like, or not to be motivated, like what would you leave them on, Terry?
I think the first one would be to set goals. It gives you something to aim at, whether that's actually like an extrinsic goal or something like, you know, something you want to do, whether it's a 5K race for life, whether it is a photo shoot, whether it's something like that. Set challenges and goals throughout the year. That helps. We always set SMART goals with our clients at BodySmart, which means we give them 4 weeks to go after 2 or 3, like a physical goal, a mindset goal, and a body composition goal. And we set like a realistic time frame and some actions to get there, because when you're setting regular goals, you are going to be, like, in inverted commas, more motivated to go after that, because you've got something, like, it's like the carrot on the stick.
You can see it, can't you? Yeah. It doesn't feel that far away. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. So setting goals is a big one, I think, for me, but not just setting goals, setting the behaviors that are going to get to that goal, that are going to lead there, because without them, the goals won't be achieved. I think the second one would be just show up. Like, just show up for yourself every day. Show up if you're in coaching, show up for your coach, show up for your kids. Just show up and just put the work in, because when you're building habits, it is literally impossible to build a habit without doing it repeatedly. And so even if it feels like you're failing, just show up and do it again anyway. Show up and do it again, do it again, do it again, and you will eventually build a habit. And it's those habits which create the change. So as hard as that is, and as easy as it is for me to say, to just show up every day, it really is that. Like, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to get it right. You don't have to worry about failing. But if you show up and you go again and you try and you try and you try and you keep going, it will become a habit. So that's secondly the thing I keep saying. You
gotta show up, and you gotta show up for you as well. You really have. I think that part there is like doing your best. I think a lot of people forget, like, when you're actually doing your best, like, it often sucks.
Yeah.
When you like if you've ever been in work and you've been under loads of pressure, and you're like, I'm doing my best, like, you're pushing it, you know what I mean? You really are pushing it and doing your hardest. But yeah, like, showing up, doing your best, like, it's tough, but like, it does help you build that, like, consistent momentum. Yeah,
for sure. When you're just showing up, like, you don't realize, like, when people are in that, like, flow state, it's when they're just doing.
Yeah.
That, like, they're operating. It's not like it's not when they've achieved something, they're looking back and they're like, wow, that was amazing. You feel your best when you're actually doing the things. And it takes sometimes time to get there, to get into that kind of, like, what we call a flow state or whatever, but you just have to do it. And I literally can't show any client what it feels like, what it looks like until they're there. Like, you just got to do it. You got to show up every day. And then I guess my third piece, the third piece would be around being smart with your habit building. So it's making it clear, obvious, attractive. Like, if it's not working, like, how can I make this easier to do? If it's not obvious, can I literally, like, if I need to, can I just stick something on the back of every door in my house to just remind me? Can I set 10 alarms to really annoy myself that I need to remember to put the food in the Tupperware box tonight, or whatever it might be? Like, make it clear and obvious, because although some of these things might sound really stupid, or it means that, like... Yeah,
trust me, they're not. Like,
they're not.
It helps so much. They help so much.
Yeah, you literally... It's just a period of time where you're like, okay, it's like driving in that car. Like, it feels like it's impossible, but you need someone there going, okay, handbrake on. Now, hands at 10 and 2. Now slightly take your foot off. You need someone there, like... in your face, telling you exactly what to do until you don't need it anymore. And then you can take the stuff off the back of the door and the house looks nice again. But
FYI, it's much harder to learn to drive a car in the UK than it is in the US, because we have to learn to drive a car properly.
Yeah.
With a clutch. Yeah. But what Americans say, driving stick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would be it. It would be just to... if you know what habit you need to do, whether that's with you've agreed that with a coach, or whether you're just doing something yourself, make it super easy, obvious, clear for you to do, so that it's almost harder to do, not to do that thing. Whether that's putting your trainers in your bedroom doorway, so you have to literally physically step over them, whether it is putting your clothes out the night before, putting your phone across the bedroom, whatever you need to do to just make it so hard not to do that thing, that's the easiest way to build a habit.
Yeah. Awesome. For me, I'll just probably give one, which is, I feel like we all have that inner bitch. I really do. And I think a lot of our clients have had that inner bitch to the point where the inner bitch is that mental chatter that we have talking us out of all those situations. But I think a lot of people have lost trust with themselves. They've lost that ability to trust themselves, in the sense of they've said they will take action for so long and not done it, that they don't even trust, they just don't believe that, like, they say they're going to do this action, this habit, they're going to have a kickstart with their health and fitness, and then all of a sudden they don't stick to their word, or they don't stick to their actions because they probably set too much to begin with. And they start to really lose that self-trust, and that inner bitch just gets in their head. Like, I still have that voice. I'm sure you still have that voice. I think everyone has that voice. But like, by starting small and beating that voice consistently, like, you really do start to build like a level of self-trust where I feel like you just get to the point where you're just like unfuckable, because you know, like, regardless of how loud that voice gets, you're going to show up and do the thing regardless. It doesn't always mean that you're going to go and have your best workout. It doesn't always mean that you're going to make the absolute best food choices, but you are showing up and doing your best regardless of the situation and outcome. And I think that's just like a really important place to get to, and a really important mindset to develop, because like we said earlier, I think some people feel like there's a huge disconnect to like where they are and where we are. And I think it's just that same sort of principle, which is just sets and reps. And over a long enough period of time, you will start to build self-trust. You will start to build discipline and become the person that you know that you can and should be.
Yeah, and even use that inner bitch to your power, because when you're learning that to go against it, and even that itself becomes a habit where then every time the inner bitch comes up, you're like, I'm actually like, this makes me motivated to do this thing, because I'm not going to let the inner bitch win. That becomes a habit itself.
Yeah, definitely. That is for me, for sure. Anytime that voice gets loud, I'm like, fuck, now I'm going to have to do it. Awesome. Well, look, thank you very much for jumping on today, Terry.
Well, thanks for having me.